Hello, and welcome to the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Ben Sapp, Director of the Mazza Museum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the In the Studio webinar, where we will travel into the art studio with multi-talented illustrators, where we'll take a peek at their illustration processes and workspaces. We'd like to thank our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom can be found listed on the Ohioana website. And a thanks to our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. For everyone in the audience, we'll be leaving the last 10 minutes of this webinar for open questions. If you'd like to ask our panelists a question, please enter it into the Q&A feature listed at the bottom of your screen. And now I'm pleased to welcome our illustrators, Tom Batiuk, Becky Gregory, Jacob Grant, and Joe Sufin. I'd like each of our panelists to tell a little bit about yourself and your book that is featured at the festival this week. Tom, would you please go first?
Absolutely. The book that I have out right now is volume 11 of the complete Funky Winker Bean. I do the comic strip Funky Winker Bean and the comic strip Crankshaft. And this is a continuing collection of all the Funky Winker Bean strips that have been done so far. So we're up to 11 finally.
And Tom, could you tell a little bit more about yourself and the work you do?
Oh, sure. I've been doing this for 50 years. This year is Funky's 50th anniversary. Started in 1972. I went to Kent State University, studied art there. When I graduated, I taught art in junior high in Elyria for a couple of years. And then I went to New York. I was doing a strip for a local paper for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. And I was doing a comic strip once a week for their teen page. I took that to New York, and it's like a script out of a bad B movie. I just was very lucky the first time I went, was able to get syndicated, and Funky Winker Bean started about a year after that.
Great, thank you. Becky, could you share with us?
Hi, everyone. I am Becky Gregory, and this is my debut picture book I wrote and illustrated called Escape to Play. It's about 3 rowdy dogs on the farm that get out and wreak havoc all over the farm. So they make a mess wherever they go. There is a little mouse on every page that kids enjoy finding. He's also in the background here. It's Norman. And there's also famous artwork in the back that I've recreated throughout the book. So there's 12 pieces of artwork that are in the pages that they can learn about in the back as well. And a little bit more about me. I went to the Ohio State University studying art, painting and drawing, and have been working on this book for a while now, as well as being a part of STBWI, learning, going conferences, served as the illustrator coordinator, and now I'm working on my publishing company, Bookling Media.
Great, thank you, Becky. Jacob, how about you?
All right, I think you can hear me okay, yes? Okay, hello, I'm Jacob Grant. I am an author and an illustrator who makes picture books, like Through with the Zoo. We got Bear Scare here, and this is my brand new book. It is called No Pants. Now, you can probably tell what this story is about just based on this cover, because we have a little boy who looks very excited about not wearing his pants. But I originally grew up in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and now live in Oak Park, just outside of Chicago, with my patient wife, a 3-year-old girl, and a 6-year-old boy. And after this, I have to go coach his soccer team. So busy Saturday.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. And last but not least, Joe, would you please share your book and a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Ben. I'm Joe Sutphin. Been illustrating books for kids for 10 years now, primarily working in children's novels. I've only done one actual picture book, some that would probably equate as picture books, but they were for school publishing. Illustrated Word of Mouse for James Patterson, and the Wing Feather series by Andrew Peterson, which has been a really wonderful series. My most recent book, which is featured at the festival, is Little Pilgrim's Progress with Moody Publishers, and this is a new children's edition of Pilgrim's Progress, written by John Bunyan nearly 400 years ago. So it's probably one of the earliest adventure novels ever written, having a little man character who is trying to reach an ultimate fantastic destination. And the book is fairly heavily illustrated. And really happy with the way it turned out.
Great. And Joe, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an illustrator?
Yeah, I wanted to get into illustration. I actually dropped out of art college back in the 90s. I attended for 3 years at the Columbus College of Art and Design, and things just weren't great in my life, and I stepped away from it for a while, and I came back to it about 15 years ago, and reached out to some heroes of mine in the illustration field who thankfully took me under their wing and kind of helped me find my way. And 10 years ago, started working in publishing.
Great. Thank you. And the kind of the theme of this webinar is for each of you to share with us a little bit about your space, where you work, what it looks like, and maybe a little bit about something that you're working on now. So Tom, would you be willing to start this sharing?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, and I'm going to share studio spaces now. Is that where we're?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So this is Catherine Powers, the voice you're hearing right now. I'm the assistant director at the Ohioana Library, and this is our technologically fancy panel here today. So I'm going to be doing some tech work on muting folks and giving audio and visual privileges. So bear with us here as we spotlight Tom on the screen. So just one sec. All right. And Tom, I'll let you know when everybody is off screen.
Okay.
All right, and I think you are perfect to go. And we'll be doing about 6 minutes per illustrator in our session to see their studio and hear about the process and all that good stuff. So you'll hear my voice again for a little timekeeping too. So thank you, everybody in the audience.
Okay, thank you. So I'm usually on a writer's panel, and there's probably a good reason for that. I think the work I do, the 2 strips, are really driven, 80 to 90% of it's driven by the writing these days. Once the artwork reaches a certain level, it grows incrementally, whereas the writing seems to expand and has lots of room. So everything starts with a yellow legal pad and the scripts that I write on that. And that's, it's like the old adage, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. If it's not on my yellow legal pad, it's not in the strip. And if they ever stop making legal pads in yellow, I probably won't ever be able to write again. And I'm not joking about that. So once the script is written up and everything, it goes to my drawing board, and the drawing board's in the other room. But before I get to talking about what I'm doing on the drawing board, I actually wrote about it in the intro to my latest book. And so I'd just like to read the little parts that I wrote there from it. The story starts with a drawing board that my father took me to buy when I was in the 7th grade. By then, I had made it abundantly clear to anyone who would listen that my plan in life was to become a cartoonist. Pulling it off necessitated my acquiring a drawing board right now, if not sooner, because time was a-wasting, as Snuffy Smith was fond of saying in the Sunday comics. The board was a beast. It measured 42 inches by 32 inches high and was constructed to last for the ages, made from solid oak with iron castings for adjusting the height and pitch. It weighed a ton, and it became a Sisyphean task lugging it from my parents' house to my first apartment, and then repeating the lug to a second apartment, and then again when it reached its final place of residence in the studio above the garage at my house. Bought for the then princely sum especially to a 7th grader, of $25, it proved strong enough to carry the weight of 32 years as of this current collection of comic strip creation. And like I said, this is Funky's 50th year anniversary. So it has carried the weight of 50 years of creating comic strips. So once I get to that board, the first thing that needs to be done is the penciling. Just sketching out, everything is really tightly rendered, so that I know exactly what's happening and don't leave a lot of guesswork when it comes time for the inking. For the first 25 years of Funky, I pencil everything all by myself. And these days, I get help on the work from Chuck Ayers, who used to be the artist on Crankshaft, and he works with me now on pencils on Funky. Now, I've always inked with markers, and markers don't really work well going over pencil, or a lot of markers don't work well on certain types of paper, but they all work pretty good on a really nice vellum. So my work is inked on Canson vellum paper. It's a nice quality paper. And then if I have aspects of the strip that I want to lay back, like have an atmospheric perspective, or other things that I want to add, that I want to knock out and put in light gray tones, I ink them on a separate sheet of vellum that will be connected with a strip. I'm going to do a little thing. Hope that nobody gets motion sickness. I'm going to spin us around really quickly. And I see I've gone to screensaver here. But I want to show you how the work looks once it lands on the computer. After it's completely inked, it needs to be scanned. And then once it's scanned in, I'm ready to take it to the next step and add some of the effects that I put on the other layers. For example, in the panel on the right, Rocky's wedding dress, there are floral designs. And so I pop those in a light gray tone. On the panel in the middle, I wanted some mountains in the background. And again, I wanted there to be atmospheric perspective, and I wanted to add a little more texture with gray tones. So on the panel, the overlay panel, those are all popped in from that. And then there are lots of places on the internet to find really nice camouflage filters. Filter Forge is one. So I grab something there and we pop it in for the tones for Rocky's uniform. And then Dan Davis, who's the artist on Crankshaft right now, does the tones for me. He's kind of a wizard with that, and they really add a nice dimension to the work. And then the final piece popping in here is the highlights in the mirror. And so now we've taken everything sort of full circle and gotten back to the words and the lettering. A couple of years ago, I had my lettering style turned into a font that I can just type in on the computer. So the next step will just be to type that in.
About 1 minute left, Tom.
In what we call the funky font. So that's a completed strip, and that's what goes into creating a typical Funky Winkerbean strip. The next step is just rinse and repeat and do it 365 days a year. And I want a last final caveat in my last 30 seconds. I don't usually work on a strip this way. I don't take it from start to finish. I usually work in batches. So I'll do weeks of penciling, weeks of inking, and then weeks of lettering and everything. So maybe a 5 to 6 week batch is my normal working method. And that's how I do the Funky Winkerbean strip.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. That was fascinating to see all the back end on how you work. Thank you so much. We got wonderful comments in the chat here too. So I'm going to turn off your camera now, Tom. And I'm going to turn on Becky Gehrisch's.
Can you hear me and see everything okay?
Yes, we're just on your camera phone right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then we're all good.
Okay. So this is some of my setup. I've got a variety of things I use right now. For the picture book I have was all done in acrylic painting. But I wanted to start on some other things that I'm also working on and or do in general beyond picture books. So first off, this is my custom made desk that my father-in-law made for me that I helped design so I can move that around, pull the lid out and work. I also work in colored pencils, and I take, I blend them. So I use these Carandash, I think that's how you pronounce it, luminance colored pencils. And I use Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, and I blend the colors together. When I'm working on portraits, I do pet portraits, and I do people portraits and other things. So but this is an illustration I worked on with that, with the colored pencils. And here is another one I worked on as an illustration that I sell prints of. And something I've been working on is a picture book about a penguin who goes to explore and goes to a candy island. So I did this as well in the colored pencils. Before that, you can kind of see in my sketchbook here, I would sketch it out, just get an idea of what I wanted, lay out different scenes that I was working on with that to get an idea of where I was going. So I'm still deciding on what medium I would use for it. At the moment, the color pencils have been fun, but I think I could do different things with that. So that's still up in the air, but that's something I'm working on. Sometimes I work on a big easel here. Currently, I'm just showing one of my book, dog book pictures from Escape to Play. And you can see I've incorporated some of these real life pieces of art that are about 2 inches by 3 inches that I recreated here in the paintings. And I've got paintings up on the wall of the Escape to Play dog book, as well as some other color pencil pieces I've been working on or had worked on. In the studio, I basically work with whatever acrylic paints I can get my hands on and just put them up here so that my daughter can't get into them and get them all over my studio. So that's been useful to have. Store a lot of stuff around here. But some other pictures from Escape to Play. I wanted to get some close-ups of the work that I did on these. It each took about 40 hours to do each painting that I did. They're about either 20 by 20 inches or they're 18 by 24. And so when I would work on the picture, I would either lay out strings to kind of line up the perspective. I would also work digitally in Procreate to line stuff up in other artwork. But when I was working on this one specifically, here's one of the pictures I did. I would cut out a piece of paper of the dog and sit it on top of a larger sheet and with all my perspective lines and lay it out where I wanted to go. So for example, here is a painting I started around Christmas time, but hadn't gotten back to it. It's been a little busy. But I would take tracing paper and kind of draw or trace from my sketchbook the idea or the character that I want, and I will lay it out. So sometimes I would do that with the background. Sometimes I will only save it for the characters because I want to make sure that where they are is where I want them. And like I said, since I've been using Procreate lately, I can also do that digitally. Once I've done that, I trace them out, and then I can start layering the paints that way with just plain old acrylics. So I usually do a white layer below the character to give them some depth once I put the paint on for it to pop. So that is basically the process. This last one here was the, so you can see is the piano room from Escape to Play. You can see I've got my perspective lines in here. I've laid it all out and deciding what I want to do. And then without making anyone sick here, you can see the final once I added in the famous paintings as well. So that is what I have for everyone for my work.
Awesome, Becky. Is there anything else you want to share? You have about a minute and a half left. if you would like.
Yeah. So something that I've been in the let's see, Color Pencil magazine, which featured me. I had a 7-page article in there, and I talked a little bit more about how I use the color pencils and blending. So that was pretty fun to be a part of that. I've gotten really passionate about these pencils. So I go back and forth between those and acrylic painting, and it's just the blending that it's really kind of like oil paints in a way. So I'm basically painting with pencil. So I'm not sure if the next book I'll be doing, which is about a cheese grater, you can kind of see I worked on that in the colored pencils. So I'm not sure if I'll be using that medium or if I'll use paint for that, but either way, they're really both fun and I'm enjoying the process. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I am lucky enough that I have gotten to visit Becky's studio on many occasions since we're SWWI friends. We know each other from that organization. So yes, it is a beautiful studio space, nice and big, and just, has all these wonderful places to do art and, store everything. So it's just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your space with us.
no problem. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to turn off Becky's video and we're going to bring up Jacob Grant.
Okay, so I think you guys are looking through my phone right now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and you can hear me okay?
We totally can.
Excellent. All right, so on the other end of the spectrum here, I have a very tiny studio in the back of our house, which you can pretty much see just within the space here. Now, do most of my work. I have a little sitting space here where I'll do a lot of drawing. And then over here, I have a standing desk where whenever I'm doing work on the computer, you'll find me here. Cintiq, which is just invaluable. Use it all the time for any digital drawing. And the main reason this studio is so cramped and small, when we moved into this house, I thought, maybe I should rip out like all these cabinets here, because I hardly have any space to stand. But the plus side is I'm able to turn this into storage for just like every paper I use. I have lots of little like art pieces that I can all stack in there. So for me, it's been really invaluable as just like a flat file space. And then over here on the other side of my standing desk, I sometimes stand and draw over here. And this is like some stuff I've been working on lately. Unrelated to the No Pants book, but a new book that I am going to be sending around to publishers soon. But maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. What I want to do here is I want to show you guys a little bit about my process. So let's see if I can set my camera up. Okay. Now, the way I make the art for books like No Pants, now the way I go about that is it's a little bit like printmaking. So I'll take my drawing, and this is the cover from the follow-up book to No Pants. It's going to be called No Fair. And what I will do is I will break this drawing up into shapes, and I will draw those shapes using vine charcoal and crayon. And I can show you an example here. These are the materials I use mostly. So really messy stuff, vine charcoal, smudges like crazy, but has a really nice texture to it. Actually use this here. It's willow charcoal. And for the crayon work, I normally use these. I don't know if you can see that, but they're Neocolor 2, which are actually water soluble crayons. But for me, I just like it as a really solid crayon line that I can get. And so if you're looking at these charcoal pieces, you'll see I have a shape for Pablo's head. I have a shape for his hair and his eyes and nose, his hands. and I'll use the line work to do his pupils, the little lines on his hands, and what eventually will be the sprinkles for the donut. But eventually I will break all of these shapes down, draw them all. And again, I use my light pad here. If I turn on, boom. Yeah, so I'll use that to make it very simple to get my shapes where I need them to be. And I want to see, can we transfer to my other Zoom here? Is that possible?
Yep, absolutely. Do you want me to turn the phone one off?
Yeah, if we can do that, that's great. I think I can stop the video on this one.
Sure thing.
There we go.
Okay.
And what I want to do is I want to
Good luck
share.
to you.
Okay, so you guys should be able to see me here.
Yes, that's great.
So I am going to try and share screen so I can show you guys a quick video of how this process works, where I'm taking all of these bits and pieces that I scan and then putting them together in Photoshop. So, all right, so you should be able to see the screen here, and I'm just going to run this sped up video, which shows how I start to take all these pieces and put them in place. And you can tell this is very, very sped up. So scanning everything, using a lasso tool to pick out the pieces I want. I then am going to bring all of that over to my artwork file. And I will start to adjust. So there's the dad's sweater. I can start to add colors to those layers. So you can see everything starts out as these black and white textured shapes, but I can then apply any color and constantly like fiddle with it and change, maybe the value or the hue of the color as needed. But yeah, it's a very slow process. So I had to speed this up. This has to be like, I don't know, 20 times my regular speed. But as it goes along, you can see I'm getting in the shapes for Pablo, dropping in the shapes for his hair and his eyes, getting the colors in there, little feet. But as this moves along, and I'll just jump real quick. So it starts to really come along, and then I start to drop in my line work where I need it to be. And I think, I describe this somewhat as like printmaking, but honestly, it's a little bit more like building a Lego set with really bad instructions. It's just, there's a chaos of things I drew. I don't even remember sometimes what that little shape was that I made. So it's a lot of fiddling around and trying to get that right. But yeah, so this turns into what is the cover to my book that'll come out next year. No fair. But yeah, how are we on time? When I was testing this before, I was like, this was pushing the limit, but you tell me.
And you are perfect, because I was about to hop in and say you have 30 seconds left.
Okay, all right, excellent. But thank you everybody for coming and checking out my tiny studio. It's a pleasure to have you. I'll exit on my screen share here.
Wonderful, that was really fun. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn off your camera. And we're going to get Joe Sutphin up here. And I will just say this has been awesome because, as bummed as we are that we had to do, a third, Ohioana Book Festival virtually again, we would not have been able to do anything like this in person. So, we wanted to take definitely advantage of this virtual format to kind of do something new and interesting. And yeah, this has been really fun seeing everybody's faces. So it is all you now, Joe.
All right. Well, I wanted to say, Tom, Becky, and Jacob, that was some really inspiring and really cool stuff to see. My work is done in two different rooms. I have this loft kind of between two rooms at the top floor of our house. And I've got my desk over here. This is where I do all of my traditional art. My digital work is done in the other room, and I can take you in there in a second. At probably the first 5 or 6 years of my career, I did all my work in traditional dip pen with a Hunt 102 Crow quill. These are made by Speedball, it's kind of a painstaking process. Using FW acrylic ink because it just flows really smooth and it dries really fast. I'd put it in an inkwell and dip and scratch away, working on smooth Bristol board that just creates some really tight, clean lines. And because it's acrylic ink, it really sits on top of the paper. But what I was finding was that in books like these, where I was having to do upwards of 80 to 100 illustrations, it's just really time consuming to work using a dip pen, because there's just a lot of care that has to go into it. But I was finding that I keep a lot of sketchbooks, and in my sketchbooks, I was using micron pens and just doing tonal work with a sepia Prismacolor pencil. And I found that I actually was enjoying what I was doing in my sketchbooks way more than I was enjoying the painstaking process of making books. So I started to find ways that I could keep using those same sketchbook materials, which are the 01, 005, and the plastic nib micron pens. These sepia tone Prismacolors. One of the reasons I like the sepia is because rather than using black, no matter how hard I press with the sepia, I can still see my ink lines. And I wanted to be able to see like a lot of just life and expression. I'll use white pens for highlights over top of that. But as I started to incorporate these processes into my illustrated books, these are from Little Pilgrim's Progress, I started unifying all of the tones with some sepia acrylic gouache, which is just a really matte gouache style of acrylic, and then using white acrylic gouache with water to kind of haze out some of these background areas, so that I was getting a lot of depth of field. That way I could have stuff in the front that was really tight, and then stuff in the back that I'm washing that white over and getting some real distance there. And that is, I've scanned all these in, and then in Photoshop, I'm actually desaturating them and then applying a custom sepia to it, which helps because it's kind of unifying everything. And at the moment, I'm actually working on the official graphic novel adaptation of Richard Adams's Watership Down. And I've been working on that for almost 3 years now with my comic partner, James Sturm. And it is around 375 pages. We're about 50 pages away from completion, but I have been using this same method of drawing in the comic as well. I basically can get about a page done a day, but I really like the ability to kind of give these nice overall tones, and then to use that white gouache to kind of haze out things in the background. This all gets colored digitally in Photoshop, but the hope is that it doesn't look digital in the end. I will take you into the other room here. This is where my digital portion of my job is done. So in here, I have my scanner, which is a big oversized Epson. And then I will scan things in and paint right into the Cintiq here, which is a touch screen. I really like it. The cover for Pilgrim's Progress was actually painted 100% in Photoshop. But thankfully, Kyle Webster offers a lot of really great brushes that feel very natural. This room is also where we run our Etsy print shop. So I have a closet back here that's just packed full of bookmarks and prints that we sell on our Etsy. So it kind of serves multiple purposes. My
Joe,
flat files
you
here.
got about a minute left.
Sure. My flat files here, I keep all my paper supplies, big, huge tablets of Strathmore 400 series smooth Bristol paper that I just cut down to size when I need, and hundreds of pages of graphic novel stored away until I find somewhere else to put them. But I try and keep it varied and interesting, and because doing the same thing by yourself all day in a vacuum can be lonely at times. So, all right, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your space too. Your house is really cool. You got that whole floor to yourself, so that is really awesome. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to keep Joe on screen, and I'm going to bring in our other panelists again for some questions time, and I'm going to bring in Ben, our moderator, too, so just give me a sec here. All right. Making sure I've got everybody's correct ones here. All right. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Tom, you probably have a pop-up on your screen that says to start video. Awesome.
Okay.
Again, and Jacob, we have need my.
There we go.
Here we go. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that worked out. That was really fun. And now I will go slip back into the background and turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Catherine. Becky, the first question is for you. How did you decide which works of art to duplicate in your newest book?
A lot of them were either they went with the pictures. So the kitchen one I had the fruit and it was a still life, but also that painting was done by Pauline Powell Burns, who isn't really well known, but she's back in the 1800s when women weren't allowed to really paint or go to college. She was actually doing oil painting. She was actually playing the piano. She was pretty amazing. So I wanted to feature some people that were also not well known. Robert Duncanson is another one. He's on the cover of the book. And the Biden administration actually was donated or given a gift for their inauguration, a rainbow painting that he did. And he's from the Cincinnati area or lived in the Cincinnati area. And he was an African-American man that I wanted to make sure was featured as well. The other ones were just favorites from growing up. Grant's, the American Gothic, that was one of my favorites. My dad had a print of, so I wanted to make sure those and like the Van Goghs were in there too. So yeah, that's why.
Thank you. Tom, this question for you. Today is the last day of your strip Crankshaft being set at the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival with Lillian's Adventures as the author. How is it that you came to set the strip at the Ohioana Book Festival? Thank you for doing that the past 6 years.
Well, I was attending the festival and just taking in what was all around me. And when you do comic strips, especially when you do 2 comic strips, you're looking for ideas everywhere you go. And Lillian was a character in Crankshaft, and she had opened a bookstore over her garage. And I thought, why not have her go to the Ohioana Book Festival? So it started out, she went down just as a fan and was talking to artists and stuff on the panels. She wanted to do some writing. So the next year she goes back to learn how to do that. The following year she came back as an author. And this year she's virtual because the festival is virtual. So it's just stealing from my own life and watching things that go on around me and then just applying them to the characters in the strip.
Good, thank you. And Tom, do you work in batches to assist with the story's continuity?
It helps. I mean, that definitely is a big help. And yeah, I guess I do. It really works better that way. Plus, once you drop into something, once you drop into inking, it's better to do a large amount of it and rather than jumping back and forth all the time. It takes me a while to get up to speed in each one of these steps. And I also do it for that reason.
Great, thank you. Jacob, have you always worked digitally? And it is a very detailed process. What do you find are your biggest advantages in this process?
You know, I've always done digital, but it's always been this blend of, you know, as I was showing, trying to get all of these handmade textures into the computer so that even though it is digital, it still can feel like something that was handmade. That for me has always been essential for it. But yeah, with digital work, it's always been a control thing. You know, with digital, you're able to control so much, and I always enjoyed that. Some of the new stuff I've been doing, I think I showed you guys briefly. So I'm working on this story, and basically in this story, the way I'm making it is all, it's like a pastel monoprint, where I will draw a scene out with pastels in these strips, and then using a tool, I will mash them down onto the paper to get a print of the little creatures. And so what's really cool about that and nice and refreshing for me is it's just like, it's all handmade, very little digital touch up. And that's the direction I want to head, just to do something different. That's where I am now.
Yeah. Thank you. Joe, you shared two parts of your work process or your work platform in your studio. Is there one place that you like working better than the other?
Well, yeah, I like to be at my desk, just sitting here with pencils and pens and brushes and paint. I don't really enjoy being in there working on the Cintiq, working in Photoshop, but I have worked in Photoshop since the mid 90s, early 90s. So it's just kind of, it's a part of work as an illustrator, and it's super helpful to be able to have that. I don't even think that I don't know how I would do the actual bookmaking side of this without the digital piece, because I never mail any of my art to a publisher, and that's super helpful. I have a lot of control over what gets scanned and how it looks when it's scanned.
Yeah, thank you. Becky, which kind of colored pencils did you say that you used?
Yes, it's I never pronounce it right. It's from a Swiss company called Carandache, Carandasche or something like that. And it's luminance is the subcategory of it. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I was never going to try and say how to pronounce it. Never.
I know. They're great. Yeah, and you can blend them really nicely, and they don't break very much, and they last forever. And well, you use them up, and I have like little bits because they're pretty pricey, but they're amazing. So
thank you for that information, both of you. Next question, Joe, you have taken some amazing, possibly daunting classic projects. Do you work chapter by chapter or first lay out the entire work in a book dummy format? And then as you progress through lengthy projects, do you find yourself revisiting completed illustrations and making revisions?
I work chronologically typically. I think that it helps me stay consistent with the characters' likenesses, and it just keeps my head in the story, especially because I don't read very fast. I've never been a great reader. So working in novels can be hard because you have to know this entire big work of fiction in order to illustrate things appropriately. I don't work in dummies, and depending on the publisher, typically I have to do sketches and get those sketches approved. Amazingly, when I worked with Moody on Little Pilgrim, our team was so small that it was really just me and my art director. So there was no approval process. There was so much trust in me that I could sit down, read the chapter that I was going to illustrate that day, and basically do this final piece by the end of the day, scan it in, and that's what went in the book with very little corrections. I think that when you're working on large volume projects, especially a comic that's 300 plus pages, there's no real mistakes. I just work and go, and whatever's there makes it into the book.
Good, thank you. Becky, this kind of goes back to the first question that I asked you. Are those works of art cited anywhere in your book?
Yes, actually, they are in the back. I've got a back matter section. And so the actual prints or the actual paintings are recreated. So I've included questions for schools or parents or caregivers to ask. I have a bolded word and easy to read and understand for kids as best as it can be. For example, Pauline Powell Burns made still life paintings. She arranged everyday items and then painted what she saw. So I wanted to make sure kids could understand a little bit about the words here. Like there's regionalism for Grant Wood, there's abstract, cubism, landscape. It tells the name of the artist. It talks about the title, and then a couple questions like this one for Claude Monet. Can you find the water lilies in this book? And what animals have you seen at the pond? So it's fun to go back and then find all of these throughout the book as well. So
Thank you. What would you say, each of you, is your most interesting illustrating or writing quirk?
You say quirk?
Yes.
I think for me, I just found out recently I should be mixing my paints with like a palette knife or something. I just mix it with my paintbrush. So I have to get into it, and I use that paint even though it's jammed up in the bristles, but apparently I'm not supposed to be doing that way, but I don't care.
It works.
I personally just work better and am happier when I can avoid redrawing. I don't like going back to art multiple times. I don't like the process of sketching, drawing, tracing, redrawing, refining. I feel like I lose the feeling that I'm making art. I feel like I'm manufacturing something at that point. So I really like the ability to sit and do a piece of art in a few hours and walk away from it and call it done.
Great, thank you.
I'm with you on that, Joe.
Tom, how about you?
Yeah, I guess probably the quirkiest stuff is involved in sneaking up on the work. You do things to get into the mood. So I'll come into the studio, and rather than just immediately sitting down to write, I'll like re-alphabetize my books, or something, and just clean something, whatever, just to get into the mood and get ready. And then I'll put some music on that I listen to while I write. It's very softly, you can barely hear it, but I kind of like that having running underneath, because it kind of ties up part of my brain that allows me then to just go on and do the other stuff I need to do. So as quirks go, that's probably it.
I like that, sneaking up on your work. I like that a lot. And then Jacob, how about you?
I was struggling. I'm sure there's like some weirdness to my work methods that I probably can't see, and my wife would really easily just point out like, oh, you do this all the time. But I think for me, it's I'm creating a way to work that is not timely whatsoever. And just to see more examples of like all these bits and pieces I create, which are like a total mess. I just have like a whole folder of these things after I finish a book. And because it's Vine charcoal and just like, you can just wipe it away and it all gets on all the other papers, I'm not even sure why I save them. Like, it's just a complete mess in there. But, for now, it is what has worked. So I continue to slog through it.
Great. What do you enjoy doing when you're not in your studio?
Oh, me?
All of you.
Well, I don't. I'll start. Outside of this, being a parent of 2 young kids, there is a lot of energy in that. So right now, I've been coaching my son's soccer team. This is like the first time I've tried coaching, which is okay, first and second graders. But that has been consuming my last month here. But outside of that, I really enjoy playing board games. So if anybody has played the European style of board games, I would say games like Wingspan, if you ever heard of it, I adore. And I even have to admit that like games like Dungeons and Dragons, very fun. Even as an adult, I strongly advise checking it out.
Thank you.
Fun.
Becky, how about you?
I have been enjoying going camping with the family the last few years. We've gotten out. My husband actually will work from the road, and I, am working and watching the kids, make sure they're not getting into trouble. So that's been really fun. We were in a number of states last year. This year we're going to stick close to home because of gas prices, but hopefully soon after that we might get out west or something like that. So I do that, and I dabble with guitar and I play my clarinet. So things like that are fun.
Great, thank you. Tom?
And I think my pandemic go-to was just reading. Reading a lot of books that I have that I hadn't gotten to, and rereading a lot of books that I had enjoyed in the past. And I found I had a lot more time to do it now. So that was probably my go-to thing.
Great. And Joe?
I love going out back. We've got some property, so I like to go out and fish or just walk the creek or go up in the hillside and look for salamanders and snakes. And I like to get my guitar out and sing some songs with my wife. We used to have a band together for years. And we watch a lot of football.
Good. Thank you. This is to all of you. Do any of you have a favorite book to read aloud to children, or a favorite book that was read to you?
I'll jump in. When our son was young, I always liked reading Goodnight Moon because it was really short. It allowed you to get through it pretty quickly. His favorite books always were really, really long, but that was my go-to book.
Great, thank you. Jacob, I think
our kids are out of the house and adults now, but we read a lot of Dr. Seuss with our kids when they were little. There's loads of Dr. Seuss.
Okay. Jacob, it seemed like you may have gone to get your
yeah, I got quite a few laying around, but this is one I always go back to. You guys can see Swimmy by Leo Leone. It's a classic. I grew up with it. This is the paperback that I grew up with, and among all books, I love pretty much anything he makes. But I do want to shout out a book that came out last year. It is called Mel Fell. It's by Corey Tabor. Absolutely brilliant book. If you haven't checked it out, actually, I think it won an award this year, didn't it? Maybe the Caldecott honor or something. Oh, well deserved. Well deserved.
Okay. Thank you. And Becky?
My kids are 8 and 10, and we still often read picture books quite a lot. And when I was little, I don't know if this was very popular, but it was Write a Purple Pelican, and it was just random silly poems. I don't know. I still love it, and I still will read it with them. I just like nonsensical things like that, so that's fun. But basically, whatever's new, we're getting it from the library. And right now, my son's really into history and numbers, so we're looking at nonfiction books about the Titanic. So it's either silly or serious. I'm not sure.
Good. Would you have any recommendations for young people that really young people of all ages that might be considering either becoming an author or an illustrator when they get out of school and pursue a career?
And I'll hop in real quick to say 5-minute warning.
Thank you.
I'd be fine starting this. I would say to them that sketchbooks are great. I would encourage you not to buy really fancy sketchbooks because they're very intimidating and you probably won't ever draw in them. Buy sketchbooks that you feel fine tossing to the side and picking it up whenever and just drawing. I would also encourage you to draw a lot because the more comfortable you are with your own line work and hand work, the more likely you are to be able to relinquish ideas and art and not kind of cling to every single thing. And then last, I would just say that being an illustrator means that you're making pictures that tell a story. So It's fun to draw characters and design things, but that's kind of the junk food of the illustration world. So learn how to tell stories with the pictures.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I agree with Joe completely on that one. That was, sorry, Jacob. That was exactly what I would say. The sketchbook idea, and I have some sketchbooks that are just beautiful, but I've never touched them inside. I actually, I'm not sure if this is, you'd have to ask your parents, of course, but my daughter, I have allowed her to draw all over her bedroom. She just creates. So her bed is covered in her art, her dresser, her walls, and she just keeps adding to it. And I'm fine with that, because to me, it's just furniture that she can draw on. So of course, ask your parents before you would do anything like that, but practice and just play. That's what I think would be the best.
Thank you. Jacob?
I was just going to say, reinstate that practice is everything. I set aside time each day to just draw for fun, just drew a little bit each day, just something. Because for me, my ideas always come from that sketchbook, and it's just like drawing something. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, and maybe it looks like it has a story to tell. So practice, yeah, like I'm not a big believer in talent. I think all of us here probably, when we were young, we just decided we liked drawing, and we drew a lot. And now we've, drawn for so many years. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's repetition, getting better at it, and keep working at it.
Okay, thank you. Tom, would you have anything
Yeah,
to
well,
add?
it's actually all the above, except one thing I've always noticed when people show me who want to be cartoonists, who want to do cartooning, they just show me all their pictures. And it's about writing as much as it is drawing. And so you need to practice, throw that into the practice mix as well.
Good. Thank you. Well, I, along with everyone at home, we'd like to thank you. Thank our panelists, Tom, Becky, Jacob, and Joe, for the work that you do, the generosity that you have shared today with us, and the resources that we are given from you to take out and share with audience of all ages. So thank you. Thank each and every one of you. A reminder to all of you at home, you can get copies of the books by each of our illustrators from the Book Loft of German Village at their website, which is bookloft.com. So please go to the website and purchase these wonderful works of art. I'd also like to thank again our festival sponsors and partners, and you at home. I would like to thank you for joining us. Please check out the Ohioana website for all of this year's festival programming. Thank you, be well, and hope to see you all again real soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you.